Max is confident Red Bull can turn the season around with upgrades coming, Mercedes reveals plans for the 2025 car, and Renault is looking to sell the team. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Mercedes may still be chasing answers about Formula One's current ground effect cars, but it has no interest in writing off next year to get ahead for 2026's new rules era. The German manufacturer has had a roller coaster of a season. Having started on the back foot, it delivered a run of victories before the summer break, but has since slipped back in recent races. And with it still playing catch-up against the ultra-consistent McLaren squad, the temptation to give up on closing that gap for next year in favor of making an early effort to get ahead for the new regulations that are coming for 2026 is obvious. However, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff says the squad has clear targets in delivering wins each and every season, so there is no question that it will push on as much as it can for 2025. This is the crux of the matter every year, and especially if you have such a big regulatory change. Are you going to compromise one year or the other? Said Wolff in an exclusive interview with Autosport. But I'd like to take it from Niki Lauda motto when being asked, would you rather win this one or the next one? And he says, both. Sometimes it is much less complex than one thinks. Probably the transition of people and capability into the 2026 regulations is going to happen a bit earlier than it would under stable regulations, but it's not going to be game-changing. Nobody's going to switch the machines off in January unless you are really nowhere. But there is nothing to gain, because between P10 and P7 doesn't make a difference for us anyway. We are fighting for victories and podiums and cannot write it off. Mercedes' determination to continue throwing everything it can at the current rules comes despite it scratching its head at times over what makes things click. Wolff explained that the fluctuating form of the top teams in F1 was very hard to understand. This variance in performance from race to race or over a few races is very difficult to compute because what looks like an unchanged car can go from race winning to P6, he said. The only team that is not a victim of that is McLaren, who I think have such a solid baseline and a less narrow window than all of us, that they're able to keep the performance stable. All of the others bounce between exuberance and depression. Before the summer, everyone wrote off Ferrari, but they have come back very strong. Before the summer, it was Mercedes who was the leading team, and clearly not today anymore. So it is so intricate to identify those performance contributors that at times even that most clever people are lost. Asked for his best guess about why car performance moves around so much, Wolff said, "We were before the summer break pretty clear where the performance came from. And today we are less because what everyone seems to find out is that more downforce doesn't always translate into better lap time. Now, this is not the sensational news of the century, but it is the interaction between track, temperatures, tires, balance, aerodynamics, and driver impulse, so many variables, that if you get all your ducks in one line, you are fast. And if there is just one factor that is out of line, you can look quickly very bad. The uncertainty about nailing the elements to extract consistent race-winning form means it is crucial Mercedes learns as much as it can over the remainder of this season, so it is well prepared for next year. Wolff sees huge value in the fact that it knows the W15 has won races, so it is not an F1 flop. Every session now is, in a way, interesting, because we are able to benchmark against the good races, he said. We can see what's different on the car, what's different on the track, what happened with the tires and all of that. It's not like we don't know that this car has pace. It's a race winner. And while Mercedes has enjoyed a run of race victories this season that suggests it is starting to get the most of the current regulations, Wolff says the gap to the front is still too much. The objective that we have set ourselves every year is to win races, he said. We have won 3, 2 were on merit. So you can say from that standpoint, we are meeting certain expectations. But if you look at all of the season, we're not. It's extremely tight now, between 4 teams, which is 8 cars. And unfortunately, due to non-performance DNFs, the gap to the leading team is just too big. So we find ourselves in a position in the Constructors' Championship, which is not satisfying at all. Max Verstappen is hopeful that Monza has been the low point of this Formula One season for Red Bull, as the team is trying to find its form again with its 2024 car. When Verstappen crossed the finish line at the opening race in Bahrain with a 22-second lead, consensus in the paddock was that 2024 would be a repeat of the 2 previous F1 seasons. 6 months later, Reality is very different, with Red Bull having taken a wrong turn with the RB20's development, while its closest rivals, led by McLaren, have made immense progress. Sitting down with Autosport in Singapore, Verstappen delves into the challenges that Red Bull has faced after starting off the year so well. In the beginning, I was surprised as well, but if you look at what our problems were, then I fully understand it, the Dutchman says. At some point, we have gone in the wrong direction. The other teams have either not faced that particular point yet, or they developed the car in a slightly different way. That is always difficult to assess. With Verstappen still dominant in Japan and China, the Miami and Imola race weekends in May appeared to be a turning point, but the reigning world champion reveals he sensed much earlier than the outside world that things weren't quite right at Red Bull. Early on, I realized that the feeling was very different from last year's car in terms of balance, he explains. At that time, our car was still a lot quicker than the others, or maybe I should say that the others were not so good back then, so at that stage we could still compensate for our difficulties. In the races after that, it got worse and worse. At one point, our car was just very difficult to drive, and at the same time, the others made real progress. Verstappen has repeatedly stated he feels the front and the rear end of the car were not feeling connected anymore, and had been a visible departure from last year's machine. At the car presentation in Milton Keynes last winter, Verstappen revealed he was shocked by the stark changes when he first saw the RB20's sketches, which now raises the question whether or not the change of concept has been a mistake in hindsight. I don't think you can tell from the outside what went wrong, so that's not the point, Verstappen dismisses. What the car looks like on the outside is not the issue. Verstappen's handling comments imply that Red Bull's problem was at least partly connected to the floor. Unintended consequences of a new floor are a headache that many teams have faced under these regulations. Mercedes struggled for 2 years with the ground effect cars, while Ferrari saw high-speed bouncing return with a floor update in Barcelona. It seems trickier than that everyone thinks, Verstappen acknowledges. At the moment, even McLaren is holding back a new floor, which they are not fully sure about. It's a lot more sensitive with upgrades than under previous regulations. Teams are also facing difficulties correlating their sensitive floor upgrades in the wind tunnel with how the car actually behaves out in the real world, finding out the hard way that downforce in the virtual world didn't always make a car quicker on track. That appears especially relevant to Red Bull's case, given its relatively outdated wind tunnel, with the team working on plans for a new facility. That is a very difficult topic to talk about, but it is more complicated to get that right than with the old cars, Verstappen acknowledges, while playing down the impact of the team's wind tunnel. It's true that we have a fairly old wind tunnel, but until this year it did everything right. Some things are just hard to understand. You see that with all the other teams as well, except McLaren. All teams have had their own problems, including teams with modern wind tunnels. I think it is just extremely difficult to fine-tune things perfectly or to get exactly the right data out of it. That can be down to a lot of things in the wind tunnel itself or how it correlates with the track. For Red Bull, its main objective is to now end its run of poor form and make step-by-step progress. According to Verstappen, that upward trajectory has already started with the floor upgrade in Baku. Verstappen took the wrong setup choice in Azerbaijan, which makes comparisons difficult, but following a difficult spell teammate Sergio Perez was able to fight for the podium before a late clash with Ferrari's Carlos Sainz. A week later, Verstappen took second in Singapore, and while he was miles away from title rival Lando Norris in the McLaren, the fact that Red Bull finished second on what had been its worst track in 2023 was a positive sign. The team only mentioned subtle changes to the underfloor in Baku, but Verstappen is hopeful that this specific upgrade is the beginning of a solution. Yes, it felt better. That was already a good step for us. I do think we are moving in the right direction now. It will take some time. You can't turn something like this around in 1 or 2 weeks. But I do think the team was happy with what they saw in Baku as well. It's not enough to compete with Norris and McLaren for race wins just yet, but Red Bull will bring another update package to the United States Grand Prix in Austin later this month. The magnitude and effectiveness of its latest upgrades remains to be seen, but Verstappen is hopeful that the worst of this F1 season, with a disastrous Monza race the absolute low point, is now behind him. Yes, I do think so, to be honest. Hopefully we can continue to make good steps from here. Renault's decision to end its Formula One Works engine project has been one of the biggest stories of the 2024 season. The move, only made official last week, has triggered huge controversy within the factory walls at Viry-Châtillon, where the French manufacturer's F1 power units have been made since the 1970s. But while abandoning its own engine in favor of a customer Mercedes deal for the Alpine F1 team is seismic, it was pretty interesting that the news was tucked away in a sentence in a press release that was instead focused more on the transformation of its engine facility into a high-tech engineering center. It added to the intrigue of why things were changing in such a dramatic way, with Alpine's current leadership duo of team principal Oliver Oakes and F1 advisor Flavio Briatore both being clear that the change of engine plan was instigated by management above them. But the first answers have now appeared, with Renault CEO Luca De Meo offering some fascinating explanations of the motivations behind the call in an exclusive interview with French newspaper L'Equipe. While Renault's engine staff had repeatedly talked about the 2026 engine project being on target with its performance figures, De Meo has said that while the call was heartbreaking, it was the bottom-line financial figures that talked in the end. "I am a manager. I run a listed company," he said. "I have to rethink the F1 project to finally win. So I am looking for shortcuts to achieve this. We have become invisible. Another 2 years like this and the project would completely deflate. We have been on a downward slope for 3 seasons. We had to shake all that up, with a financial logic in mind." For De Meo, the huge investment required to produce an engine, which is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, made zero sense when a cheaper customer power unit could be slotted in that would deliver just as much, if not more, performance for less than $20 million. "Real enthusiasts are not concerned by this calculation. I am," he said. De Meo went on to explain that the new rules coming for 2026, with a greater reliance on efficiency and battery power, put things in an ever sharper focus when it came to costs. He said Viry, with 340 staff on F1, could have no chance of competing with Mercedes, who he suggests employs 900. He added, "They have test benches that we don't have." The transition to the hybrid era required powerful investments that were underestimated at the time. "We operate, structurally, with 3 cylinders when others have 8. When I arrived 4 years ago, the group wanted to stop F1. If it's still there, it's because I saved the thing. But we don't have the structure to be at the forefront of battery chemistry development, software management, energy recovery. It's not just putting an engine on the bench and saying, 'Hey boss, I'm doing 415 kWh.' F1 has long been a valuable marketing tool for engine manufacturers who have counted on success being followed through by showroom sales. But De Meo suggests the links between F1 and road cars have become blurred now, as people associate car brands with different things. Aston Martin's success on track, for example, should deliver an uptick in its own road car sales. The same is true for McLaren. De Meo is clear that the value of building your own engine now has disappeared. "The sponsors come for a team, not for an engine," he said. "The partners sign with McLaren, not with Mercedes under the hood. The F1 public has changed. It has expanded to include young people, women. This new clientele has a different interpretation of this sport. We support a driver, a color, a brand, not an engine. Alpine, given our ranking, is losing bonuses. Sponsors are rare. We have a hole. My shareholders know how to count. Alpine must make money." He also said that his dream of making a French super team ultimately failed because the country failed to get behind it. "I wanted to make a French team, the French Ferrari," he said. "I put 2 French drivers in the seats. They crashed into each other. Take a tour of an A524 with me. There's not a single French sponsor. Not one. I knocked on many doors. In vain." While Renault and Alpine have guaranteed jobs for the staff who were previously employed on its F1 engine project, De Meo accepts that not all may be willing to take on different roles. But he has revealed that those who want to stay on in F1 may be well placed, with rivals already having been in touch about luring them elsewhere. De Meo added, "If there are some who are positively driven by the idea of making an F1 engine, they will have no problem repositioning themselves. Fred Vasseur, the boss of the Ferrari team, called us to ask if he could get some people out of our company and avoid them having gardening leave before going to work for them. Okay, that's life. We're not going to imprison our guys." It was suggested earlier this year that Renault closing down its F1 engine project was a key step in it putting its team up for sale. This is something that has been repeatedly denied, and De Meo has yet again explained why it makes no sense to go through with it. He says that with the value of teams continuing to skyrocket under F1's boom, that there is no reason to offload the operation. "I receive calls every 15 days from financiers, eccentrics, who want to enter F1, he he said. They know that after 2026 it will cost much more. If you are given $1 billion today to take the team, they will be able to resell it for double 2 years later. It is full of speculators here. I have refused 50 times. A team will soon be worth between 3 and 5 billion. I'm not going to sell, I'm not stupid. Being in F1 is essential for the Alpine brand. We are in a closed club. It gives credibility to the brand among car enthusiasts. We do not need this money. Kimi Antonelli has received strong support from his fellow countryman Vittorio Liuzzi, who believes that Antonelli is set to have an exceptional future in Formula One. The reason behind this optimism is clear. Antonelli possesses a remarkable level of speed that is not something that can be purchased or easily replicated. When Antonelli appears on the starting grid at the Australian Grand Prix next March, he will make history as the 99th Italian driver to participate in Formula One. He will be racing as part of the prestigious Mercedes team, which recently confirmed that the 18-year-old prodigy will take over the seat previously held by the legendary Lewis Hamilton. This announcement came just one day after Antonelli made headlines with his impressive debut during the FP1 session at the Italian Grand Prix. In this challenging session, Antonelli seized the opportunity to replace George Russell in one of Mercedes' 2 young driver roles for the season. From the moment he hit the track, he made a mark by setting the fastest time, often referred to as going purple, on his very first flying lap. Remarkably, he managed to improve his time on his second lap, showcasing his extraordinary talent. Unfortunately, his promising performance came to a sudden halt when he crashed the W15 car at the Parabolica corner, a tricky part of the iconic Monza circuit. Toto Wolff, the team principal of Mercedes, commented on the young driver's mishap, stating that the car simply could not handle the level of performance Antonelli was pushing it to. Wolff expressed that they would rather face challenges in slowing him down than in speeding him up. Reflecting on Antonelli's performance of just 1.5 laps, he described it as astonishing and a strong indicator of the young driver's potential. Liuzzi, a former Formula One driver himself, echoed Wolff's sentiments about Antonelli's future. He mentioned that Kimi has consistently demonstrated remarkable abilities since his early days in karting. According to Liuzzi, Antonelli is an exceptionally talented driver who truly deserves his place in Formula One. He acknowledged that crashes like the one at Monza can happen to anyone stepping into the highly competitive world of F1, noting the immense pressure and stress that comes with the sport. However, he firmly believes that Antonelli is deserving of this opportunity and that he will shine in the sport. Liuzzi expressed his happiness that Wolff had given Antonelli a chance to prove himself and highlighted the supportive environment at Mercedes, which he feels is invaluable for upcoming talent. He is excited about watching Antonelli's journey in 2025, anticipating how well he will perform alongside fellow driver George Russell, whom he described as an excellent teammate and benchmark for Antonelli. Liuzzi is confident that Antonelli will learn a great deal from Russell and quickly acclimate to the demands of Formula One. He acknowledged that the challenges ahead will be significant for a rookie driver, especially in a top-tier team like Mercedes, which brings a lot of expectations and pressure. Yet, Liuzzi is optimistic and believes that if Antonelli plays his cards right and approaches the situation with intelligence, he will have an incredibly bright future ahead of him in the sport. The most crucial point he made is that Antonelli's natural speed is undeniably there, and it is something that cannot be simply bought or faked. It is the most critical element for a successful racing career. With Antonelli's inclusion, he will become the 99th Italian driver to ever race in Formula One, following in the footsteps of former Alfa Romeo racer Antonio Giovinazzi, who was the most recent Italian on the grid. It is worth noting that there has not been an Italian driver competing in Formula One since 2021, which Liuzzi pointed out as a significant absence in the sport. He expressed the sentiment that having an Italian driver back in Formula One is very important, emphasizing Italy's rich motorsport history. Besides hosting prestigious Grand Prix, Italy is home to many iconic and historic racing brands, and as such, it is vital to keep the passion for motorsport burning bright among the Italian people. Liuzzi highlighted that this opportunity for Antonelli signifies a positive turn for Italian motorsport, noting the tremendous support he is likely to receive from fans in Italy who have a deep love for Formula One. Antonelli has signed a 1-year contract with Mercedes, and Wolff acknowledged that bringing in such a young talent as Russell's teammate comes with its fair share of risks. However, He believes that it is a risk worth taking due to the encouraging signs of Antonelli's talent and potential. Wolff pointed out that as teams invest in young drivers, incidents like crashes are part of the learning curve, and teams need to be ready to embrace that reality. He further added that they are not inclined to hold a driver back, and are instead excited to work with someone who possesses immense speed and the confidence that Antonelli brings to the team. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you around.